All right. So thank you all for coming. Obviously, this is a crazy, crazy time in the world. And as Logan and I were thinking back earlier this year, we were like, man, we did this customer event last year. Ethan was a part of it, and we had some other customers come in, and it was in person. And obviously, a lot of logistics go into making something like that happen, but the results were really incredible. I mean, really cool relationships were formed. And when all this started happening, Logan and I had been talking about how do we do that again? How do we do that again? And then all of this stuff happened. And it's like, okay, well, clearly doing something in person is not going to be the answer. And so we started brainstorming, like, what would it look like for us to do this virtually? And I'm a big believer that we collectively are going to go a whole lot further, a whole lot faster if we go there together. And so I just think this is a really cool time for us to kind of link arms. Obviously, we're going to be talking about B2B podcasting on these calls, but I think connecting with one another is going to be helpful in a lot other ways. You guys knowing just other B2B marketers that are in the trenches and working at technology companies that are growing quickly. I just think there's going to be a lot of good that comes out of this. So in terms of what we're going to be covering today, we're going to be talking about this new approach that we've started experimenting with and are already seeing really incredible results with around content planning. So Logan's going to talk a little bit about how we used to do content planning and the evolution of that process to how we're thinking about it today. He's going to explain that a little bit. And then we're going to dive really deep into this planning process, really what we call Google Alphabet Soup. It's leveraging Google Auto Suggest to help us drive and figure out topics that our audience actually wants to hear because they're typing it into Google. And so capitalizing on Google's data to tell us what our listeners want to hear, and then planning episodes accordingly. And then we're going to run through some examples. So, I'm going to be sharing my screen. We're going to be showing you guys how to actually do this, how you can think about doing it for your shows. And then we're going to also try to talk about a little bit of competitive content research. So looking at how do you examine, what's currently on the first page of Google? Is this a topic that we should go after, or should we go after something a little less competitive because we have a higher likelihood of ranking, getting the written version of the podcast episode ranking on the first page if we adjust the keyword that we target a little bit. So going to get into all of the more granular detail on that. After each section, we're going to open it up for you guys to ask questions. So if we say something, you're like, I was a little confused by that or don't understand that, just hit that little raise hand button on there. And then whenever we get to that next stopping point, we'll stop and answer all the questions as we get to the end of each section of this. So just wanted to give you guys the heads up on how this is going to work. Logan, do you want to kick us off and start with kind of talking about the evolution of how we used to think about content planning and what it's evolved to today?
Absolutely, man. Awesome. Thanks for that intro, James. Thank you everybody for making time for this. I really appreciate it. Quick, just poll real quick. Give me a thumbs up on video if my audio is coming through okay for you guys. Awesome. I see mostly thumbs up. Awesome. All right, guys. So as some of you know, because some of the folks on this call for your shows, we are serving as pre-interview support as well as post-interview support, where we are helping book the guests and also prep those guests. And you guys, pretty much everybody on this call knows that we believe in interview-based episodes with folks who may be prospects, maybe customers. They're in the trenches. They fit your buyer persona. It's everything that James talks about in his book, which is nicely placed over my left shoulder here. And so through that process, we've leaned on some pretty specific ways in which we plan content episodes. And that's basically been, hey, if I'm talking to someone who is in the market that I'm trying to reach, they fit the profile of our customer, whatever the case might be, simply because they fit that persona, and asking them what do they want to talk about that fits with the theme of your show, it allows for quicker interview booking. We can let them kind of direct it. A lot of people like that. It allows you to focus on the relationship with the guest, which has its own benefits outside of the content reach. And then for the content, we've always believed that, hey, you don't need to struggle to come up with this perfect content calendar over the next year. If you ask people what they want to talk about, because they are peers to your ideal listeners, then what they're saying is likely what other people want to hear. Now, it doesn't get super tactical into targeting for SEO. And so we've seen kind of this traditional way of content planning of going to people who fit and are very similar to your ideal listeners, asking them what they want to talk about. It does kind of crowdsource it in a way, allows you to have those relationships at scale, and creates thought leadership and brand awareness content. Now, most of you, I mean, I think everybody on this call understands podcasts help you generate a lot of content that can feed demand gen efforts, but really where it fits is top of funnel, right? Thought leadership, brand awareness, showing your expertise. And what we've been working on lately is merging that sort of content planning that we're not entirely getting away from, but supplementing it to help your podcast cover more of the funnel. And so what we're going to be talking about is how you can still keep doing this, but mixing in what we call these SEO friendly episodes by using the Google Alphabet Soup methodology to create content that is further down the funnel, because it's going to help you create an SEO rich blog post that is designed from the very get-go to hit the first page of Google for a long tail keyword that it is showing search intent and rolls up to the theme of your show. So the idea here is that this is a supplemental way to plan content. It's not that we're saying, hey, you shouldn't, have guests talk about what they want to talk about, but you can use them in tandem. You can kind of have this 1-2 punch with your show. And that's what we're doing a lot right now with our collective shows, like the B2B sales show, even B2B growth, and others in the collective show network that we're building right now. So that's kind of the two-pronged approach. Next, I'm going to go into really what you need to start the research process for these SEO friendly episodes. But just want to pause there and see if there were any questions as I explained kind of the give and take and the balance between these two types of content planning. All right, cool. Jamie, I have to say that those are some tropical plants for Boston.
Oh,
Colin's got a great backdrop too. I love it. All right. So really, it's a 3-step approach, the way that we break it down. There is the theme of your show, which all of you well know, and I'll talk about that in a second, the subtopics that roll up into the main theme of your show, and then identifying those long tail keywords, which can be the direction for the blog post that's going to come out of your episode. Could it actually be, the pre-written headline for the episode? So I'm going to speak to determining how you know your theme. You take the next step to subtopics, and then kick it over to James to talk about how you then use Google Alphabet Soup to find those long tail keywords that roll up. So when I say theme, most of you already know the theme of your podcast. That's going to be, something at a very high level, like B2B sales, customer experience, creativity, IT transformation, something at a very high level. It may even be in the name of your show, right? So that part's easy. The subtopics are really, within your expertise. What are those trends? What are those subtopics that are still somewhat of a broad category, not a broad category that roll up to your theme, but they're a little bit more specific. So here's some examples within B2B sales for the B2B sales show: sales hiring, sales coaching, prospecting, presentation skills, closing, the relationship between AEs and CSMs, those sorts of things that are still a broad category, but narrower than the general theme of your show. And it's what we suggest is taking the theme of your show, determining 3 to 5 subtopics that, like I said, might be sales coaching or sales hiring underneath B2B sales. And now using that as the basis for using Google Alphabet Soup to research and find the long tail keywords. So from there, I'm going to kick it over to James to talk a little bit more about how you take those next steps, how you then research content that is currently hitting the first page of Google, and go from there. So James, I'll kick it over to you, sir.
Yeah, thanks, man. So we've actually also got Dan Sanchez on the call. I just saw that he just jumped on. Dan has recently joined our team and is really heading up this effort. And Logan and I would not be doing this apart from Dan. Dan showed us this, showed me this late last year, and just really opened my eyes to how effective this is. And what made this so attractive, you know, this idea of using Google Auto Suggest to tell you what topics people want to know about. And kind of instead of us coming up with topics ourselves, or depending on our guests coming up with topics, using Google to do it, because he noticed that there's this big discrepancy between what ads were, what he was seeing in AdWords, like how versus what search volume tools like Moz and Ahrefs. I don't know if any of you guys are using a lot of those tools, but those kind of keyword planner tools that typically tell you how much volume a particular keyword is getting, he just found them to be way off. They just weren't accurate, because he was running a lot of AdWords, and he knew how, you know, he knew what the volume was because he was paying for it on one side, but then seeing that a tool was telling him that the number was way off. And so he started on a brand new website. Dan, you can chime in and correct me if I'm wrong on any of this, but it was a brand new website really at the later part of last year. So it hasn't been around very long at all. And in April, that site is on track to get 100,000 views in the month of April. And 75% of the blog posts that his team has written for that site are ranking on the first page of Google. So I say all this to say that this is actually working. We have seen that with articles that we've started to write using this methodology. We're seeing crazy results. Like, we posted an article about the top 29 sales conferences, B2B sales conferences. And within a week of publishing it, we had won the Google snippet, meaning like the first result that pulls up for B2B sales conferences. And we were blown away by that. We've now done that with another topic on the manufacturing show. And so we're seeing this methodology to planning episodes work, because the written content we're creating on the back of those episodes is actually ranking on page 1 of Google. Dan, did I miss anything there? I want to give context before I dive into actually showing folks how it works.
Sure. I always like to give a little bit of context. If you're familiar with like search engine optimization as an industry, it's been there for like well over 20 years now. As long as there's been search engines, there's been people who've wanted to rank high on them. And usually a lot of people will suggest the correlation of getting lots of links to a piece of content. And they'll suggest like, yes, you have to make awesome content, but you have to get lots of people to link to that content. I always found that to be just so difficult that it almost wasn't worth doing. Like, I would still blog, but I was like, I was always discouraged, because trying to get people to link to your content was always frustratingly hard. So people have developed guest posting strategies and all kinds of ways to build out SEO. What I discovered recently, and I didn't make it up, there was actually a blogger who kind of figured this out. His name's Jim Harmer. He ran a big blog called improvephotography.com. But when he started talking about his SEO strategy, I took note, because it was different than the rest of the community was talking about out there. It was actually not going after any links, just writing awesome content, but making sure you're actually hitting the intent in such a way that you were getting ranked, and then giving it enough time to rank in Google. People weren't often sometimes they'd expect rankings to come within a week or two. And if they didn't, then they must have failed. But I find that Google sometimes takes between 6 and 8 months before they finally show where your kind of final placement in the rankings are going to be for a while. So I've applied a lot of these principles to our own website at Bethany Global University, which is my current employer that I'm phasing out of soon to join the Sweetfish team, and ranked a number of different articles there, and started ranking, being able to write articles fast enough with a student team that we were able to, I don't know, kind of cover all the topics for the university. We started a whole new site that was much broader. Since Bethany's a Christian, like a niche Christian school, we ended up going after just all of Christianity, which there's like an infinite number of topics to blog about in that category, and just started writing about anything we could find people were searching for in Google. So that's what I want to show a little bit about the process we've discovered and how we've been able to turn a small team of like 5-6 students into essentially a blogging machine here. And now what we're taking into Sweetfish Media to turn not only how we do podcasts at Sweetfish, but also to do the same thing with blog posts as well.
Dan, do you think it'd be better for me to make you a host here so you could show people your screen and work through some examples?
Yeah, that'd be fantastic.
Awesome. All right. Just made you a host, so you should be able to share your screen.
Any questions for anybody as we kind of transition there from, okay, theme, subtopics. Now Dan's going to jump into, all right, I have my subtopic. What do I do? How do I leverage Google Auto Suggest? Any questions here real quick? Take your silence as a no. All right. Over to you, Dan.
In the bottom there, Dan, if you just hit share. Yep, there you go.
We're there.
Awesome.
All right, perfect. So all of our search engine optimization starts with just Google itself. Like James said, I don't rely on the SEO tools anymore to tell me what people are searching. I find them to be inaccurate and unreliable. They're not bad. They can give you some good ideas, but I like to go to Google itself. And then what we do is a method called alphabet soup, where we'll start with a topic like sales, right? And Google will give us a bunch of auto suggest to let us know what people are searching regarding this simple keyword. We can go out a little farther and put sales, maybe hiring. Sales hiring, you can see the only reason why Google even puts these here is because people are searching them. Their algorithms are telling us what people are searching. And I find this to be a much more reliable tool to actually find out what people are searching. You don't know what the volume is, but that's okay. I find that we're able to write content fast enough that you can hit lots of topics, find out what ranks, what brings traffic, and then readjust as you find where the most traffic is coming from. But if you're using this method, at least you're shooting in the right places. I know James asked me to look at sales hiring questions before this. Now, it's not just enough to find what people are searching for. Like, you kind of have to know, like, how good of a blog post do I have to write? Some blog post topics keyword topics are harder to rank for than others. So I can kind of give you a quick overview of like how I look at a search engine results page like this. So the first thing I notice after even just pulling up sales hiring questions is that I see someone's won the snippet and it's HubSpot. And we have Brainshark, The Muse, LinkedIn, Sales Hacker. All of them are, at least most of these are brands that I've heard of before, and they're very big. I know they produce a lot of content, which tells me that these guys, this is a fairly competitive keyword to go after. The more I see recognizable brands, I look at their titles. Are they good titles, or are they kind of halfway there? Are they hitting the intent? That's probably the most important part, is actually looking at like, what is someone who's searching this actually looking for? Because oftentimes, and you'll see a few examples in a minute, a lot of times Google will try their best to rank for the intent, and sometimes people will rank that it's not quite on the intent. If they put interview questions, but it didn't say sales in it, it's like, well, that's close, but we're looking for sales interview questions. This keyword in particular, you can see all the way down to the bottom. I'm still seeing brands I recognize, and the titles are still really good. This is going to be a fairly competitive keyword. Earlier this morning, I did look at sales. Let's see, what was it? Sales hiring.
Well, I just want to know, as he's doing this, the part that the reason they call it alphabet soup is so he's taking that subtopic. So Lori, for example, on this call, she does a lot of episodes for the B2B Growth Show around sales hiring, because that's what she does as a business. She does a lot of consulting around that. And so putting in sales hiring and then putting in the letter A and seeing what pulls up there. And so can you type in A real quick, Dan?
That's right.
If Lori were doing this to figure out like, okay, what would be some great episodes that I could do that people actually want to know, she could go in and type sales hiring, the letter A, and now she can look through and go, okay, I don't really, some of these aren't applicable, but some of them are, like a sales hiring assessment. That Google, it's clearly searched enough that Google is serving that up as an auto suggested result. And so maybe she's got, like, man, I could come up with an episode about a sales hiring assessment that we use with our clients that works really, really well. So he's just working through the alphabet there, A, B, C. And then when he was doing this morning, he came up with what he's about to show you now, which I think was like sales hiring presentation or something like that.
Yeah. Sales hiring
so he
presentation.
Put in P, presentation pulled up. And so he goes, okay, people are actually searching for sales hiring presentation. And because we know people are searching for it, it's worth doing an episode about it and then repurposing that episode into written content that can land on the first page of this. But if we look and go, okay, can we actually turn an episode into an article that ranks on page 1? And that's what he's about to show you now, why he thinks this is a much smarter keyword to go after than the one we were looking at before, which was sales interview questions.
Yep. So sales interview questions, very competitive, but sales hiring presentation, not so much. When I look at this, I still see HubSpot, but I did see that it's not quite matching the intent. It's not quite as on there as if you look at sales hiring, it's not sales hiring presentation. So maybe only a part of that blog post is about sales hiring presentations. And that's what Google's counting, but it's only counting that section of the blog post. So if they only have maybe 500 words written on the presentation part, that's kind of what that blog post counts for, which means maybe a 1,200 word article on a sales hiring presentation is probably going to beat HubSpot, likely, like these other guys have already. Let's see. I usually open these guys up.
Yeah. Dan, could you walk us through, like, what are you looking for? I know you're looking at word count. You're looking at, are the brands that are creating this content, are they recognizable brands? Because if they're recognizable brands, there's a good chance that they've, put a lot of effort into ranking for this. And if all you're seeing is, Salesforce and LinkedIn and Sales Hacker and, HubSpot, it's, that kind of tips you off to it being competitive. But are there some other factors that you're looking for as you're diving into each of these articles to see, hey, is this a keyword we should actually be targeting?
Yep. Just without diving into the articles themselves, I'm looking some telltale signs that it's going to be not as competitive as when I see sites like this. Indeed, sales presentation jobs. Well, we're looking at sales hiring presentation. It's not quite on the intent. I'm also looking for sites like Quora or any site that's like using user-generated content, Reddit. If I see any of those within the top 5, I know it's not competitive. Those are never great quality.
Which is great, because then we go, okay, now we want to document that in Airtable or, Google Sheet and identify that as, hey, this is a topic I could do an episode around.
That's right. I even dig into and go just glance at the articles. I don't read them. I just see like, oh, is most of it on topic? Is it organized well? This one's designed well. I go and look at it. I got a little Chrome plugin where I can go and highlight all the text and count the word count. You can see this one's a lot. It might be covering some of the plugins or some of the comments at the bottom. No, it's a fairly long post. I can see why this one ranked number 1.
But again, if this is ranking, if this is about the perfect sales hiring process, but the search term was sales interview presentation or sales hiring presentation, even this isn't necessarily, it's the best result that Google could serve up because there was nothing else that was truly matching the search intent of sales hiring presentation. Is that right?
That's right. I often find I can outrank someone just from hitting the intent better. If they weren't actually going after that specific keyword and you could tell they wandered off the intent. They started with sales hiring presentation and moved on to sales hiring questions. Well, they've kind of moved off the intent, and now Google's only going to count part of that article towards the intent. And I don't find word count. Word count correlates with what Google's looking for, and they're looking for in-depth articles, which is why longer is usually better. They're looking for things that are hit the question well, but that doesn't necessarily mean it has to be as long as, we've all written college papers where it's like it was a lot of words but it didn't say a lot. It still has to be fairly in depth and right to the point, but still be
could you walk through with us, Dan, some other variations of how you go about putting in phrases into Google search? So because I know that there's somewhere you can put like how to in front of your in front of the keyword that you're going after. Obviously doing A, B, C, after, but there are some other variations that you've talked about that I'd love for you to share.
Absolutely. So while you could do the ABC afterwards, you can also do that ahead of it. So if I'm looking for keywords around company culture, I could do the same thing, and it's going to give me slightly different variations of what I might have found doing it in the other way. But I find it kind of cues it up to find all kinds of new ones. I can even put in common phrases like how to, like he mentioned, and throw some space in there, and then do it again in between. How to describe company culture, how to improve company culture, how to change, build, define. And I can put an E and find quite a bit. I usually find with one key term like this, company culture, I can easily dig up somewhere between like 60, 200, maybe 300 different keyword variations that I'll put into an Excel sheet afterwards.
And so when you're putting that into an Excel sheet, what are the things? So for our podcasters that are listening to this, like what would be, can you walk us through like how you organize that data so they, like, if they want to go start doing this afternoon and just like, oh man, these are 20 great ideas for episodes, like what are things that they should be documenting whenever they're logging these different results that they're seeing?
Awesome. Yep. I usually just start with the normal alphabet soup and start working my way through my keyboard and start grabbing the ones that are relevant. Because as you can see, there's going to be some, I think these are all pretty good if you're looking for company culture, but you've seen a few already where it's like, it just doesn't even make sense. You're not going to do sales ads. That's not what you're talking about. I did an example this morning where I picked how to measure company culture, and I stuck that into Airtable here. Sweetfish already has an Airtable set up with many different keywords that they're targeting. And I built this one out where I put it into the Excel sheet, and later we'll go back and probably do these in mass where I'll assign it to a writer status, probably assign it to a show and a category for Sweetfish. Here I put the competition. This one I put as a medium, which I know I'm going to need to write a staple post for, which is about a 2,500 word post, which means the competition was around 1,000 to 1,500 mark as far as their word count, provided they were on the topic for 1,500 words. And then I write the titles ahead of time. I find the title writing to be probably one of the crux points of this whole thing. The title matters quite a bit. Here I wrote a systematic way to measure company culture with examples. When I did an analysis of company culture, there was good blog posts. I mean, we have MIT up here measuring culture in leading companies, more than a feeling. How do you measure culture? It's not bad, but I imagine that someone who's looking for how to measure company culture is looking for actual metrics and examples of how they apply out so that they could do it themselves or to many companies, right? So I'm trying to get into their heads and imagine what's the best possible thing. Like if I were searching for this, how can I deliver that in 2,500 words?
Yep.
I don't want to write too much or not too little, but how do I deliver that?
And so are you looking then at the top 3 results and then kind of scanning through to see, okay, what are the subheaders in these articles? What are things they're covering? And then asking yourself, what could I add to make this article significantly better, 10 times better than what this article is that's currently ranking? Is that kind of how the progression plays out?
I don't do that when I'm writing the title, but when I start getting into the research phase, when I'm starting to write the article, then yes. For this one, I did go.
So your process is more like you're just going through and identifying in bulk, like, hey, these are a bunch of different ideas. And so you're writing down keywords in Airtable, and then you kind of you go back through at a later time. And when you're actually going to figure out like, okay, which episodes am I going to create? You're just working off of Airtable at that point, and then doing that competitive research shortly before kind of preparing what the content's going to be.
That's right. I go through and make my whole keyword list. Then I go through and judge the competition on those keywords. And then I'll go back through and write all the titles all at once. I find that for me, that's just the rhythm I've found to be helpful. Some people will do one at a time all the way through.
And we've gone through a lot of this stuff. Any questions that you all have? I know we've dumped a lot of information on you. Anything that you'd like us to dive deeper into? Things you'd like Dan or myself to elaborate on?
Yeah, I have a quick question. Yeah, Dan, I love everything that you were saying. Definitely adding to the a million things I need to do to be successful at my job. And I'm actually not even a marketing person. I'm curious, could you just type into Google Connected Worker 4.0? I'm just curious, first blush, you could spend 5 seconds. What do you see? Or what is a Connected Worker 4.0? It's kind of playing around with it, but I'm just kind of seeing what you see right now.
Okay. Is Connected Worker 4.0 like something highly specific? Is that like a brand? What is that?
It's an industry term. It's a technology term for specific workers who are related to wearable devices. So it could be like a watch, typically for enterprise. So they might have like a helmet on. They could, any type of wearable device where the worker is connected to being able to like transmit their data.
What would the difference be, Joe, if in doing the research around the phrase connected worker versus Connected Worker 4.0? Like, are you seeing a screen right now? Like what's pulling up with just Connected Worker, like platform?
It is a thing. Yeah. If you type in 4, it's like, oh, you mean 4.0.
Yeah,
it's like 4 isn't a thing, but 4.0 is. So it's there.
It's a specific term. Yeah, it's a very specific term.
Would it make sense, Joe, for you to create content around terms that Google's pulling up when you search Connected Worker?
Yeah. So example, I already shot a podcast. I've already shot some podcasts that I'm going to release next Tuesday. And I'm thinking right now, I've got the blog post that Tim has written up, and then I'm thinking, okay, how can I go back in and make them 10x better right now? Because I kind of just shot the podcast, not on a whim, but I didn't necessarily go this deep. And so Nagaro is actually the company I work for, which is funny. And so I want to outrank them basically. And so my podcast is called Tech Tables. It's not out yet, but it'll be out soon. I want to outrank Nagaro and everybody else for Connected Worker 4.0 is kind of one of those terms that would be great. So
awesome.
Got it.
Yeah. So this is awesome. Great example.
When I look at these, sometimes when I'm starting in a new category that I haven't been in before, and this is why I like to go through all the keywords first to do competition all at once, because it takes me a while to figure out who the players are. Like in marketing, I know HubSpot's a big thing. They blog so much that they hit a lot of categories. But in this one, I'm like, okay, I don't know. It would take me a while to see who's coming up over and over again, who the brand is. Even seeing their website is like, does their website look legit? Because that usually tells me, well, they're probably a bigger player versus if it looks like a mom and pop shop, right? But here, I can see, it's like PR Newswire comes up. You're like, how often do they really rank? It's probably not super competitive if PR Newswire is on the bottom.
Yeah.
Let's see, even Connected Worker. Let's see, Connected Worker, that looks right. Connected Worker 4.0 isn't even in the title on this one, but it sounds like it's a big high part of the page.
Yep.
Industry 4.0 and the Connected Worker. So part of me is like, are they hitting the topics? Connected Worker emerges as a key pillar of the industrial cutoff. At first glance, I'm like, it doesn't look super competitive.
Is the episode that you're wanting to do about it, Joe, is it kind of explaining what Connected Worker 4.0 is?
It's no, but I am actually going to go back in and explain it. So it's called Connected Worker 4.0. Sorry, someone's trying to call me. It's called Connected Worker 4.0, how head-mounted wearables are changing the way we work and will save your industry hundreds of millions of dollars. That title may or may not really suck. I don't know. But, and so that's
What are your thoughts, Dan, on like, so if he's wanting to outrank everything right now for Connected Worker 4.0, you did a little bit of, competitive analysis to see that, hey, if PR Newswire's on there, it's probably a keyword that's worth going after. Do you think it should be more of an explanation? Like, what would you assume the search intent of somebody typing in Industry 4.0 is?
I think they're looking for a definition,
that's what I would think too.
I would start. I start if it's a broad term and I'm not sure what they're looking for, then Google probably doesn't know what they're looking for either, which is why the search results on something fairly broad, Google will deliver multiple intents because it doesn't know. If I look up the word B2B sales, Google's going to be like, well, what are they looking for? Are they looking for a definition? Are they looking for B2B sales jobs? Are they looking for how to do B2B sales? They don't know. So if that's the case, sometimes I write what I call a buffet title. My header might actually be Connected Worker 4.0 : definition. And I don't know what actually, I'd have to do more research to figure out what else
it'd be like
looking for. But I would be trying to load up other intents in the shortest amount of text possible. Definition, methodology.
Like definition, future trends, responsibilities.
Colin,
get started. I don't know.
Colin is on. Colin is on this call. Colin, if you want to unmute, it looks like you're unmuted. I'd love to hear your take. Colin is at Sales Hacker and obviously has running an incredible blog over there. They rank for pretty much anything related to sales. Colin, do you have any thoughts on kind of how do you think about headline writing and as it relates to matching search intent for the keywords that you guys are going after?
Dan, we use a really similar process to you. I always start by searching it. I don't really look at the tools a whole lot. The only time I end up looking at tools for search volume is when I want to start, like when I have my list of 100 ideas and I need to start writing, I need help picking one to start with. For this one, one thing that stands out to me is that there's videos, images, and web results. So like I'm speculating, but if I was Google, that would be me saying like, I don't know what you want. So it could be that when people search this, like Google changes their search results based on how people interact with their search results. They have a better product when they put the thing that people want most right at the top. And it tells me that they're kind of guessing, that there's may not be enough volume on this exact phrase quite yet for there to be like a really specific search intent. So like with something where it's this leading edge, you could just use the spaghetti method and just do all of the like, what is Connected Worker? What is Industry 4.0? Like how to prepare for, etc. And just start, that just from this one search, that's what I see. That would be my guess, but you probably want to do more searches on other related terms too.
I will often find that when you start to go through this method, you will see the same keywords pop up in different variations, of which I'll usually just combine them into one and write an ultimate guide to this.
Got it.
When I see videos, I also notice that or I've found that when there's videos served, that people don't click on the videos as much. When they're searching on Google, generally they're looking to read. Otherwise, they would have gone to YouTube. It's not that they don't get traffic here, and that it's probably worth actually making a video potentially for, depending on how this particular word works out. But when they go on Google, I'm not afraid to try to compete with videos. I'm like, yeah, they're probably going to skip to these guys.
Yeah. One thing that I've really learned as we've been working through this ourselves, and I'm actually working with Dan and figuring out how we're going to do this for our collective shows, the recurring theme, the mindset shift that it's doing for me is really thinking about the search intent and what is someone searching for whenever they type this in. What are they actually looking for, and trying to be empathetic to the person on the other end of that search. And it's really just fundamentally shifted how I think about all this stuff. And it's in large part due to Dan just says it. I mean, he constantly goes back to that. What's the searcher's intent? Because at the end of the day, you know, as much as Google is changing their algorithm, they want to best serve their searchers, the people that are using their platform. And so if you are building your strategy around satisfying search intent, like giving content to folks that are searching for things that you can help them with, you know, regardless of how the algorithms change, if your strategy is kind of rooted in that thinking, you're probably going to win, regardless of how they shift around the algorithm.
Yeah, when we were doing some training on this in January, James, just to drive that point home, Dan was talking with our team, and someone was like, well, the algorithm changes and people freak out, and there's always lots of changes, and this is just stuck in my mind. Dan was like, yeah, but who wins and who loses every time the algorithm changes, right? The losers are the folks who have tried to game the system. They've tried to find the loopholes that still exist, right? In the old days, it was keyword stuffing, black hat stuff. But every time Google's getting better and better because their technology and their experience is getting better. And as we said earlier, their ultimate goal, they make more money when people find what they're looking for. So it makes sense to keep that focus, and to kind of bring that back to what we were talking about before, is using this strategy with a very natural, organic way that we've always recommended content planning in your podcast. Talking as you get to know the audience that you serve, whether you've been in the same industry for 10 years or you're brand new to it in a new marketing role at a new company or a new industry, the more that you can understand those folks and have more empathy is going to help you with your typical guest-based interviews, as well as this approach too. So yeah, just kind of wanted to round that up.
I want to talk a little bit about how you can use these episodes, because as Logan and I were thinking through what we wanted to share here, this is obviously, I feel like this is a huge tool in your tool belt now, just understanding this. I mean, it's really simple. It's leveraging Google Auto Suggest to tell you what people want, as opposed to having to guess what listeners want. And but how do you actually make that happen, and how does it flesh itself out in doing podcast episodes using this strategy? And we came up with three ways to use this. So one way would be, in a very similar way that what Joe is explaining. He wants to do a solo episode, so he's going to plan this episode based on trying to rank for Connected Worker 4.0. So he's going to figure out okay, I'm gonna define it. I'm going to talk about, maybe the methodology behind it. I'm thinking through, what is somebody searching Connected Worker 4.0? What are they wanting when they search that in Google? And then I'm going to then take what I think they want to know, and I'm going to open up a Google Doc, and I'm just going to start writing down different things that I think I need to talk about during the solo episode. So the host doing a solo episode is one way to leverage this strategy. Another one is if Joe were to interview somebody at Nagarro, so somebody on his team that's an internal, subject matter expert on Connected Worker 4.0. And so Joe then doing an interview that is based on questions that he has come up with, knowing, because he's done the work of trying to figure out what is the person searching for that term actually wanting to know. So I'm going to frame it up so I can ask this person that maybe, and Joe, no offense to you at all. You may be the person on your team that's perfectly suited to talk about this topic, but there might be an example where you're like, man, Bob down the hall is actually way better to talk about this. If I came up with 7 or 8 questions, I think we could come up with a really robust episode that could then be turned into an article that actually ranks for this. So either the host doing a solo episode, the host interviewing an internal subject matter expert, and then the third way that you could use this is kind of keeping this bank of topics that you can then use for guests that maybe they're your ideal customers, maybe they're existing customers, maybe they're just relationships that you're trying to build through content-based networking, but maybe they don't have an idea for that. They don't feel strongly about what the topic is. They're like, oh yeah, I'm flattered, love to be a guest on the show. Any thoughts on what we can talk about? If you have this list and you got 10 or 12 episodes kind of queued up that like, man, if we did a great episode on this topic, there's a good chance we could actually get the written version of this to rank on page 1 of Google. You can share a few of those that you think they might know something about and say, hey, would you want to do an episode on this, or this? And we found that by offering up those suggestions, it's actually really helpful for the guest. It doesn't allow them to have to think quite as much about the content that it's not as crippling to them when you give them options. And so if you don't want to do a solo episode with a particular topic and you don't have somebody internally that you want to interview about it, just keeping those kind of in a backlog and then using them for the guests that you're going to be interviewing anyway. Those are 3 great ways to use this. Logan, is there anything I missed there?
No, I think that's a good roundup. I mean, those are the 3 ways that we're using them here. And I think, the initial thought, we've talked to some folks that say, well, we want to book guests and we want to match them to a search ready term like all the time. And sometimes that can be overwhelming, that we've got to have, a search ready research term and the perfect guest. And we also know that amidst all of this, consistency is your friend in general in content and especially in podcasting because of the serial nature. So we're not saying like stop the presses. So James, I really like that third one and kind of that mixture of how can I use this and my typical process for interviewing guests and kind of merge them together where I have this bank, and if they have something and it's still on topic and it's still good and I can still ask great questions as a host, that's fine. But it all the better, right? If they pick one of these that you've highly researched and you already have some questions ready to go. So that's kind of the blended approach we're advocating for.
Yeah. So one, and we've got about 10 minutes left, and I wanted to share something that I found as I was doing some keyword research for some articles that I know that we want to create for B2B growth to start ranking for B2B marketing keywords. And I started looking at ABM examples. Could you put in ABM examples, Dan, and since your screen's already up into Google and just show what pulls up there? ABM, yeah, there. So started looking around and I saw this one, I read the one from integrate.com. It obviously won the snippet, but I thought, man, that's not really that in depth. And then I looked at the one right below it. It was 10 real life examples of proven ABM campaigns. I'm actually good friends with the guy that wrote this. So I was like, oh, Brandon, if you click into it, I really loved what he did here because it showcases one, he clearly thought through. He went and looked and said, okay, what is, I don't know if he specifically went through and said what's ranking for ABM examples, but it seems as though he did because when you read through this article and you look through how he organized it, he went very much in depth. So where most people, if you look at other articles that are ranking for that keyword, they just list out, 6 or 7 high-level ideas. So, look at Termis's article or Influitive's article. There wasn't a lot of meat on the bones for the examples that they shared. But when you look at his article, if you could go back to his article real quick, Dan, he goes really in depth and clearly he's got a lot of empathy. So stop right there. So this custom content play. he explains it in a couple sentences. You know, a large buying committee may require you to educate many decision makers across different departments. It goes on for a couple sentences there, but then he goes deeper and he says, for this play, what was the stage? So he talks, hey, this was for a play in the middle of the funnel. Who was the target for this specific play? Well, it was one buying center at an enterprise account. What was the actual play itself? And on other ones, you see that he breaks it down like touch 1, touch 2, touch 3. He talks about the results that they got from this specific ABM play. And then he talks about the resources that they use. So in this case, they just used a designer. This to me is like, this is 10X content. And it's because he just went and he didn't have to add, 3,000 words to the article to do it. He was just thoughtful and thought critically about what is somebody searching for ABM examples, what would serve them the best. And he came up with, I think is the best article here. I'd be curious though, Dan, why do you think this one, and I've got a theory as to why it didn't rank for the snippet. I just think it was not organized the way that the one that actually ranks for the snippet for this term was organized. But I wanted to show this example because this is the kind of in-depthness that I would love for you all to be thinking about as you're thinking through, how do I create an article or an episode that can be turned into an article that's 10 times better than what's currently ranking? Because that was just a fantastic example. But Dan, you want to weigh in there and talk about, anything that you noticed from that, or we haven't talked about this prior. So if I'm putting you on the spot, I apologize. But what are your thoughts on why this performed well, but didn't quite make the snippet?
I actually think it's okay not to get the snippet. I always shoot for the snippet because you could be number 3 or 4 and bam, you're number 1. But actually they just changed their algorithm recently to where you can't own the snippet and number 1 right underneath it. You can only own one or the other now. And if preferred, I'd rather take the one right underneath the snippet. It actually gets the most clicks on average. So actually these guys are in the best coveted place. But again, I'm still going to go for the snippet just in case. I think that it's definitely more in depth. Again, Google's not looking just for word count. They're looking for in-depthness. And what they did, the thing that they did to add value was organize the information more. Yeah. Sure, they could have written about this in paragraph form, but it's not as organized. And actually it's easier to consume and they can get more value out of it more quickly. You're saving them time. Google can figure that out because, well, they control all our browsers, they control many phones. Google knows how good your content is based on how people interact with it, how long they spend on the page, if they click through to another page. So people are showing up and liking it. The reason why I think they didn't win the snippet is because it's kind of hard to figure out based on their headers how it's organized. Even scrolling around here, it's like, oh wait, look how close the H1 or H2 is from the H3, right? It's like, it's so close, you can't quite tell. And there's no maybe it should have been numbered. Usually I try to give Google the snippet right at the beginning. So if there's clear, oh, here's the 5 different examples, or here's the 10 different categories of examples, I'll do it right at the beginning as a bulleted list and maybe jump link those to the longer examples in case they want the short answer. I always give the short answer to the question in the very beginning. And that's usually what I'm trying to win the snippet with. So if it's a definition, I give the definition in textbook form. What is the answer to this? Question mark, answer, bam. I always give it right at the beginning. Sometimes it's just a list. Here's the things you need to do. Step 1, this, step 2, that. And then I break it down farther in the rest of the post.
So I reached out to Brandon because again, we've had him on B2B Growth a couple times. I've done some virtual summits with him. I know him really well. And because I want to rank for this, I want traffic I want people searching ABM examples to come to Sweetfish's website. So I reached out to him and we're actually going to do an episode on this. And we're trying to take his article that's already great and make it even better so that we can outrank him on the search term that he's already ranking for on another website. So huge win for him, because if he's ranking on business2community.com's URL and ranking on a post that he authored on sweetfishmedia.com, he's going to pull up as obviously the authority there. And so anyway, I'm just wanted to share that because we're drinking our own champagne here and we're actually doing this stuff. We're not just telling you guys that you should be doing it. And with the few articles that we've already gone live with, we're seeing really great results, and we're already, I mean, we've won the first spot on Google with a couple that I'm thinking of off the top of my head right now. And then we're on the first page for a few others, and we've just started to get really ramped up in getting going here. So any questions before we shut down here? I know we've got a few minutes left and we've gone over a lot, but any last remaining questions that we could answer before we close it out?
So I'm really curious about, oh, sorry, go ahead.
I just want to say it was really helpful. Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks, Lori.
Hi, Lori.
Hi.
I wanted to ask really quickly about prioritization, Dan. Like once you've built your big old topics using your alphabet soup, your list of topics, alphabet soup method, how do you decide what to execute on first?
There's a few things that pass through my mind. Once I have a huge list like this, I might try to arrange them in clusters, things that work well to group together. So like one, like for example, I was going to show an example, but of what was it? How to measure company culture. A lot of these people are also searching. Let's see if I can find it again. Like Apple company culture, Adobe company culture, Adidas company culture, right? These are actually all probably fairly like just not competitive. There's not a lot of articles written about Adidas company culture other than Adidas themselves, but they don't write a whole blog post about it. They're just like, here's our values. And Google chose that to rank. What I would do is write a cluster with how to measure company culture in the middle, and then do 20 of them around the edges of them. Around all these different companies that you then have taken your post about how to measure it, and then you use it to measure all the different companies around it. Boom, you have a whole cluster, a group, and then they really play with each other if you interlink them well that way. I also try to, if it's a new site, start with easy to win ones. Once you've won a number of searches, Google's like, okay, they're really an expert in this topic or this field. So I start with the easy ones, the shorter posts first. I also try to like keep not blog all into one specific category. I try to do multiple categories because you don't know which category is going to be the winning one. One category might not have enough volume, even though you're winning rankings. So you try to throw a lot of tests out there early on to figure out which categories or types of posts work the best. And then after, again, it takes a long time to rank 6 to 8 months afterwards, picking out the best ones and then doubling down on what's working really well. So I try to spread them out, start with the easier ones first, and try to create clusters of posts.
How are you guys at Sales Hacker, Colin? How are you guys currently prioritizing?
We're in this weird place. So it sounds like Dan's thinking of content as a library, right? Like
Yep.
There's two ways of thinking about it. Content as a library, content as a publication. And Sales Hacker is we're like smack dab in the middle, because we really do want to build something that's lasts forever. And we spend a lot of time updating old content to make sure it's still accurate and helpful. But at the same time, if we decide, okay, this month we're going to tackle the hiring topic niche, and then that's all you get in our newsletter for a month, you might be a little like, I don't know, if it doesn't apply to you, that's annoying. Yeah. So that's why I asked the question. Our prioritization is like seat of the pants. We end up basically just like, we work with contributors just like you guys do at Sweetfish. And so, like if Lori decides to write an article, we kind of say, all right, Lori, what do you want to write about? And then we help her find a topic that has some search volume on it and help her structure it and then optimize it. And if we know we already have 3 articles on that topic this month, we might just schedule it to publish next month.
And when you say you're looking at search, so you are looking at search volume from like Moz and those, like that is helping you figure out like, okay, Lori, is this a topic that we actually want to do?
We found most of our gains in rankings from updating old articles, but we've got thousands of them. So that's when I started looking at search volume. And like, I know if I have an article that's ranking 3 on a really high volume word that I can try to push to 2 or 1, that's where I start using volume to prioritize.
So you guys are at a completely different level than where a lot of us are at. And so, man, it's super interesting though, because I want to be there one day. And so it's exciting to see kind of, the next evolution of kind of how to be thinking about this when you guys are at the level that Sales Hacker's at.
It becomes a big maintenance job. You guys are starting with the right stuff. I mean, everything you guys laid out is what we've used.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Love it. Wonderful. Well, I want to honor you guys' time, and we're already 2 minutes over. So thank you all so much for coming. If you think of a question after this, you can reach out to Logan or myself. Just Logan at sweetfishmedia.com, James at sweetfishmedia.com. If you have a question for Dan, I don't think we've got his sweetfishmedia.com email up yet, but we can route questions to Dan. So any way that we can be helpful around this stuff beyond this call, just let us know. And really do appreciate it. And we're looking forward to doing this month after month. So excited to do this again next month on a different topic.
Yeah. Thanks, everybody. Dan, thanks for jumping in. Colin, thanks for your input, man. Everybody, appreciate your time, and hope you guys have a great rest of your week.